What is up, y'all? Kevin Kuhn here from Athlete Factors. This is the Athlete Factors podcast. My guest today is Jeffrey Cunningham, coach of the Bat City Track Club. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fabulous. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. So for those who've never been to Austin and have no frame of reference or context, why Bat City? What does that mean?
Yeah, that's really funny. Well, we're actually well known for our bats. The South Congress Avenue Bridge, it was modeled, say, renovated, whatever you do to bridges in 1980. And it basically, the way it was structured, made it perfect for bat cave. And the bats basically took up residence there, and then they fly out at dusk, typically between the months of March and September-ish in Austin at dusk. And they fly out basically in a swarm, and it's become quite a tourist attraction. And thus you have Bat City.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yep.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll kind of just move from there into wherever the conversation takes us.
Sure. Yeah. So I actually grew up in Northeast Texas and went to high school in Tyler at Lehigh, and I ran the 3200 and then the 1600 and ran cross country and graduated there in the early 1990s, and then went to Baylor and then ran cross country track at Baylor Sitka Bears, and actually ended up going to law school there. And I continued to run while I was in law school. Actually ran some PRs while I was in law school.
Nice.
And discovered some interesting things about training, about structuring the training, and what worked that was maybe a little bit different, right, than what I sort of was familiar with in high school and running an undergrad, and then sort of segued into practicing law after that.
Awesome. So did you have any idea when you were starting out your law practice, like, oh, I'm gonna get back to coaching, or was it kind of a surprise?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I never really had an inkling that I wanted to coach per se. And then literally my first year out of law school, 2001, I got a job working at a law firm in Austin, but my mother actually had a colleague whose son was an up and coming young distance runner up in Northeast Texas. And I coached him, and he ended up getting second at the state meet in the 3200 and signed with the University of Houston. That was back in 2002, I guess, when he went to University of Houston. And so then I took up coaching a spattering of kids here and there. And then my wife, who was actually an All-American, and an NCAA champion at Baylor in the 4x4, who I married, started coaching in 2004 at St. Michael's Catholic Academy, which was the largest Catholic high school in Austin at the time. And so then in the fall of 2006, I formally came on and as her assistant, and started coaching cross country at St. Michael's Catholic, sort of in the quote unquote official sense at the high school.
Nice. That's awesome. What's the origin story, or what's the background build up to Bat City Track Club?
Well, I coached a lot of high level kids in high school, and obviously trying to practice law was really busy. So I sort of had to come in and out of it sometimes. And in 2018, I had just stepped away from coaching at St. Michael's for a year. I was sort of on a sabbatical-ish at the time. One of my ex-athletes approached me and said, "Hey, would you coach me?" She was post-collegiate at that time, and I agreed to do that. And then I said, "Hey, let's run the Houston Marathon." And she did that in 2019. And then started coaching another athlete who I coached briefly in high school. And then it sort of blossomed from there. Obviously, they ran well, and they had some friends who were like, "Hey, maybe I could use some help too." And so I just started coaching individuals here and there, and it just sort of, the group grew and the group grew. And then here we sit in 2022.
That's so awesome. So how many current members do you have on the club?
We're at 20 plus right now. I think about 25. right now, excuse me. And we have everybody from Olympic trials qualifiers to people who are still, right on the cusp of running regionally elite times.
Hmm.
And that's sort of where I try to limit it to some degree,
Hmm.
only because I've got limits on my time and limits
Sure.
on how I can structure practices effectively. When I've got people running really, really fast paces and then various paces on the continuum. So we just try to structure things in a way that's conducive to high level performance for the folks on the team.
Sure. That's awesome. So is everyone, pardon me, half marathon, marathon? Do you have
Mm.
a pretty wide range of events that people are training for?
Yeah, well, our primary focus is the half marathon and the marathon. Obviously, we dip down and run 10K and run 5Ks, more sort of developmental during the training blocks. We call ourselves Bat City Track Club, but other than a few track fives and tens during the springtime, and even then, that's for selected individuals. We don't spend a lot of time training for the track events.
Hmm.
Why is that? There's a lot of people ask that. Well, I don't think that it comes as a surprise to a lot of people that the post collegiate world in track is really, really difficult. And
Hmm.
when you look at the progression of the times and performances in the US, the ability to get into a really, really good meet is really, really difficult. And so what we find is that with a lot of post collegiate athletes that want to continue their career, who didn't go and get that sort of gem spot or get that vaunted contract, where people
Hmm.
I think believe those things are falling off trees for people, and they're not.
Hmm.
Um, People have a really good opportunity to go and pay their $150 or whatever, and then you go to a marathon, you go to a half marathon, you're on the same starting line. You're in the same starting corral potentially if you get
Hmm.
into an athlete development group or into the elite field, right?
Hmm.
At some regional marathons with Olympians. And so
Sure.
it is a fascinating process that you can see with an athlete who's inspired by what can be because of the lack of barriers to entry, so to speak, into
Hmm.
getting into elite road racing. And so that's why we focus on that, right?
That's awesome. Yeah, that's especially with what's going on, like the past, really the past year, but like I'm obsessed with indoor track right now.
Right.
The US 5K record just dropped. The women's
Unbelievable
5K
races.
record just dropped. Like records are dropping all over the place right now. Like in the same race, the American, Canadian, and UK record in the 5K, like
Right.
all
And the
set.
funny thing is I actually texted my collegiate coach, Steve Gully, who's the head coach at Tulsa now. And of
Mm,
course, he was Mark Scott's coach in high school when Mark Scott won the NCAA championship in the 10,000, right?
hmm.
And then Mark went and ran 12:57. And I said, Coach, I said, you realize 12:57 is a second faster than Saeed Owita ran when he was the first guy to ever break 13 minutes? And that was my idol in 1987 when Owita ran 12:58.
Yeah.
Here's a guy who my college coach coached who just ran a 12:57. It's unbelievable to watch, right?
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
it's absolutely
yeah,
incredible. I mean, like
yeah,
every single weekend, it seems like something's going down, like something big is happening. And
right.
but yeah, like the Cole Hawker and Cooper Tier shot for
Mhm.
the indoor mile and were fractions of a second off. And like in that race, there were really only three people who finished. There were five who started. There were two pacers. So it's like, how do you get into that
That's
small of a
right.
field? You can't. You can't. Sorry, you can't. Like, but
That's right.
anybody can run a half marathon or a marathon.
That's right. And by any standard, if you're running 14:10 for 5,000 meters, you're a good runner. You're the
Hmm.
upper you're the upper one half of 1%. Probably a smaller percentage than that if we look at the total number of people who run a 5K in the US every year. Well,
Hmm.
you sure as hell can go out and run a 2:13 marathon. 2:14 marathon if you're a high-end aerobic machine, if you're a 14:05 5,000 meter guy. That's a relevant performance. And you get to
Hmm.
create your own relevance by simply just going out there and training hard. And we hear these stories of relatively, and we have to say relatively because it's in the context of already fairly elite running, but relatively ordinary runners. Women who are 16, 20, 5,000 meter runners, men who are 14, 30, 5,000 meter runners, training for years and then showing up and running some really outstanding times in the half marathon on marathon when,
Mhm.
the narrative after is who'd have thunk it or who saw it coming? And the answer is, well, my coach, because I've just been hunkered down and I've been training for 13 months and I just emerged from the mist and I did this and I was ready, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't blowing up Instagram every day. I was
Mm-mm.
just nose to the grindstone, putting in work.
Putting in work. Yeah. Just like we did this morning. It was a good day.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So that's like perfect segue. Tell me about your coaching philosophy.
Yeah. Well, my philosophy, very simply put, is um, allow yourself to dream, but then you got to put the method so that you can then somehow make sense of the madness. In other words,
Hmm.
you have to meet the physiologic demands of what it is that you seek to accomplish. And it is complicated, but not that complicated. It's about building a high end aerobic engine. Listen, we are running events that are all almost, I mean, in the 94 to 99% percentile in sort of aerobic and composition as far as the system that you're using, right?
Hmm.
And so what I tell people is 10K training doesn't look a whole lot different from marathon training, okay?
Hmm.
Except when you start doing some certain sharpening up workouts and some certain race specificity work, right?
Hmm.
At the end of the day, you better be an aerobic machine to do these events, right? So my coaching philosophy is let's run right up to sort of what we can handle from a max volume standpoint without rolling fatigue over and without getting injury. And
Hmm.
then also, I am coaching people who are not professional runners. And by professional, I mean this. I mean, most of these people have taken $200 for winning the Littleville 5K. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is nobody is laying around on massage tables all day. Nobody is sitting in cryogenic chambers for 30 minutes or 15 minutes a day, twice a week, or whatever it is you do, right?
Hmm.
These are people who are accountants, who are computer programmers, who are licensed clinical therapists, right?
Hmm.
Who have professions, not jobs, many of them, right?
Hmm.
Most of them. And so at 9 o'clock, they have to either be in a brick and mortar office or they have to be on their computer on a Zoom call. And so what I
Hmm.
do is I have to fit the training into their lives and not try to make them fit their lives into their training. And what do? We decrease training density. That's one of the big things that I do, right?
Hmm.
Let's have a really big workout. Let's make it count. Let's not fall prey to the high school and the collegiate model, which is Tuesday's track day, Friday or Thursday is tempo day, and then somehow I might even try to squeeze in a race on Saturdays and get a long run in, which means that you've done 4 hard days, and I count the long run as a hard day because in my world, 19 miles isn't easy to run, right? Even if you go out and run 7.5 minute miles, it's 19 miles, right? So
Hmm.
fit the training into their lives to keep them mentally fresh, physically fresh, reduce the chances of injury when we are not necessarily able to engage in a lot of the downtime stuff, the
Hmm.
prophylactic stuff, the
Hmm.
recovery, quote unquote, stuff. I think that people see other people doing on the internet and go, "I want to do that." It's like, yeah, but you working 60 hours a week,
Hmm.
right? Sometimes have travel demands too. I've got people get on planes and have to do track workouts in Dallas because they have business meetings, right? That's
Hmm.
the kind of thing. So my philosophy is fit the running into your life. Um, Allow yourself to dream, but then meet the physiologic needs to meet the demands of your goal, right? All the
Hmm.
while being good at the other stuff that we have to be good at: husbands, wives, professionals, etc.
Mm. Yeah, it's different when you're in college and
Oh
it's
heavens.
your job is to run. Like if you're a collegiate athlete like that was my
Yeah.
job, you know. Yeah, I went to class
Absolutely.
and I did well. And being an athlete made me better at managing my time and it made me a better student. But I wanted to run, I wanted to race. And
Oh,
so
absolutely.
there's a that doesn't exist once you hit, the real world.
No, no, it doesn't. I mean, I remember sitting in the front row of English Lit, and sitting there literally doubled over with what we refer to as steady state stomach. We've all had it, right? After
Hmm.
doing this horrible steady state course, we would go, it was 8.6 miles, and we would run to Lover's Leap in Waco, and it was 4 hills out and it was 3 hills back, right? Um, and we would run 5:20 pace, uh, literally up these massive hills all the way through and come back. And then I would have to sit there and try to concentrate in English Lit. Well, I could get away with not concentrating in English Lit because, it might be 3 weeks till the next test, right?
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
was physically there, but I could be turned off. And then class would be done at 3, right?
Hmm.
And then we could go and do some recovery stuff if we needed to and go to the trainer. And then we could lollygag into the dining hall and all that. It wasn't
Hmm.
really reality, right?
Hmm.
I
Yep.
mean, where else are you done every day at 3 o'clock? Well, I haven't been done working at 3 o'clock in 20 years, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen, right? And so you're right. Your reality changes. Your reality
Hmm.
changes. And, but what's interesting? The maturity levels go obviously way up, especially for the men, I'm told, as we get older. And it's, um, people learn how to manage their time better when they get older. And they also
Hmm.
become a little bit more in tune with their body, and also are able to jettison the marriage that we had in college, which was interesting. We were in class fewer hours a day relative to the number of hours that you and I actually worked, right?
Hmm.
But man, we would try to cram a lot into a week. And I, running races on dead legs was sort of the norm, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Now it's like, I don't ever send a runner to a race and tell them, well, we're just training through this. I mean,
Mm.
sort of ish. I mean, I had a runner on a 6-day taper going to half marathon this week, but it wasn't like, we did a hard workout 48 hours before and said, okay, go race. Good luck, everybody.
Right.
Man, that's just antithetical to sort of my approach at this point, right?
Yeah. Like, coach, why are we doing this? Like, oh, because at the end of the season, when you finally get rest, then you'll run, you'll run like
You
it's
hope.
different. Yeah. And like training and racing for a half and a full is different than having an entire season of track meets every week. Like you're kind of putting all your eggs in one basket. You don't want to run trashed. Like,
100%. It's just a different kettle of fish. Different kettle of
mm.
fish for sure. Yep.
So how how does that translate into like the X's and O's
Yes.
of the training of the programming?
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, one of the cornerstones of what it is I do, is uh, critical velocity training,
Hmm.
right? Now, we don't take every athlete and take them into the lab and test their max VO2 and know exactly what 88 to 94% of their max VO2 pace is, right?
Hmm.
But we have some ways to arrive at some pretty good guesses that are really, really functional, right? In a group environment in practice, right?
Hmm.
You could take some people and say, okay, how far can this guy run, or how far can this gal run, running all out for 12 minutes? And even if they haven't done that recently, you could take a recent 5K time and go, okay, they'll probably run maybe about 10 seconds a mile faster. If they could reduce the race time by 4.5 or 5 minutes here. And I'm guessing this is max VO2 pace. So about 90 to 94% of that is X, right?
Hmm.
So the whole point is critical velocity training is just a massive bang for your buck. Chris Papillon at UC Davis really invested a lot into that type of training, and it's done in a lot of collegiate programs. And a lot of coaches may not even call it that per se, but it's training at paces where you are not running a max VO2 pace, because you and I can agree max VO2 pace is hard. You can't
Hmm.
do it's hard to go out and do 12,000 meters of max VO2 repeats, in one workout, right?
Sure. Hmm.
You can do 12,000 meters of critical velocity workouts for repeats for sure.
Hmm.
1500s, 2Ks, 1500s, 1200s, thousands, 800s on tiny little recoveries, typically 1 minute of recovery per 1,000 meters run. But without getting
Hmm.
too far into the weeds, critical velocity training, you get the biggest bang for your buck. And it is useful for every distance, 1,500 meters to the marathon. I would even argue, even in limited amounts, even for 800-meter runners who attack it more from an aerobic standpoint rather than a
Hmm.
snappy 400-meter standpoint, right?
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, if you can increase your body's ability to deliver oxygenated blood to working muscles and you go lactic later in a race, you're going to win that distance race, even if you're not necessarily the fastest kicker or sprinter.
Hmm.
Well, at this point, when I'm dealing with high anaerobic events, building this massive aerobic system, right, where people just get really, really efficient at running at a pace that's just below max VO2 in large chunks, in fairly big workouts once every 10 to 14 days. It's really, really helpful. And you can do it, gosh, just so much of the year, right? Because it's
Hmm.
not stressful running, right?
Hmm.
And so that's one of the things that I do. And then, of course, some classic lactate threshold workouts with some progressing down to maybe some 10K and 5K pace stuff on the tail end. Um, did some of that today. It was really, really good. We had people run anywhere from a 7 mile tempo run with, 4 half-mile repeats down at 10K pace afterwards, right? And the tempo run was at a pace about 15 seconds a mile faster than their goal marathon pace,
Hmm.
and then I had, one woman run 3 miles basically at 10K pace, did 2 times a mile at 5K, and then 2 times an 800 at 3K pace today,
Hmm.
right? That's a
Hmm.
big workout, and that's a good workout, you
Yeah.
know. It's so it's tempo running with some faster stuff on the tail end, right? And this isn't maverick stuff, right? I mean, you go and you look at what Mark Scott is doing, and you're not going to be surprised. And you look at like what Carisha Schweitzer, is doing, and then a lot of
Hmm.
stuff, a lot of similar stuff. They'll go out and knock out a 5 mile tempo run, and they'll go to the track, and then they'll run 6 times an 800, at a pace, 15, 20 seconds per mile speed faster than they ran on their tempo on short
Hmm.
little recoveries. This isn't earth shattering stuff, right?
Hmm.
The failure to build an adequate oxygen delivery system and then dial in race pace during long run segments, which is keystone to what we do, to me, can leave a runner coming up short, right?
Hmm.
If you haven't figured out or felt what marathon pace feels like at 19, 20 miles, and you're in a marathon at 19 or 20 miles, the chances of your body really developing a serious loathing for you is probably pretty good, right? So, this weekend, we got a 20-mile workout for some
Hmm.
people who have marathon coming up. And it's going to
Hmm.
be a 5 mile segment at 10 seconds faster than marathon pace,
Hmm.
a 3 mile segment at 20 seconds a mile faster than marathon pace, maybe 15, right? And then a 2 mile segment where they're going to run probably at about 20 seconds a mile faster than marathon pace with 1 mile run recoveries. Boom, they're going to be knocking down the 20th mile probably 20 seconds faster than they're going to be knocking down the 20th mile on race day, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Got to do it, man. Going out and jogging your long runs and hoping that you're going to feel really, really good running a minute and 20 seconds faster than that at that point in your race in 3 weeks. I think could leave you coming up short. So those are the keystones: critical velocity training, lactate threshold training with some, sometimes sprinkling in some faster stuff on the tail end, and then building in 3 or 4 long run workouts in the last couple of months prior to a big race where you're running at goal race pace or below for half marathon and marathon for segments of that run. That way you can start neurologically building in what it feels like to run that pace, and then psychologically, man, we just really can't discount the benefits of that either. It's big time, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's so tempting to like focus on this. It's so tempting
Mm,
to look at the data that I can
mm,
pull up on Garmin, I can pull up on
right.
Strava, but like sometimes you just got to put yourself in a position where you're like, it's gonna feel like this at this point in the race. Get into that position where you feel that because you want to be used to that.
Right. I always tell people that it's about 70% science and 30% art.
Mm,
And trying to cookbook coaching can get somebody who knows nothing into a position where they know something, and they can be a real service, and they can be a real help to people who want to get moving and racing, and they can really be a massive asset to kids they coach. So I do not um, uh, 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 sort of decry the ills of cookbook coaching at a certain level. I mean,
mm,
at some point, somebody's got to start learning somewhere,
mm,
right?
mm,
But the art of coaching is something that you learn by feel from doing. And there's just really no way to explain that. My wife was coached in the Baylor system under Clyde Hart, running the
mm,
400 meters at Baylor. But Coach Hart even used to say, "Hey, I can give somebody the workouts, but until you know how to tweak it, until you know how to look at an athlete and say a little bit more of that, maybe a little bit less of that, right?
mm,
Just like a dash of salt, maybe a little less garlic, right? It's the
mm,
same way, obviously, with distance running. And I've found that over the years, I've gotten better and better. I don't think I was a great coach in 2001. I really don't. I thought I really helped that young man out. I mean, he didn't stink. He got a scholarship to University of Houston, right?
mm, mm,
But there were things that I did wrong, because what happened is I made the mistake of believing that because it worked for me when I was 18, it must have been great,
mm,
right? And my times were solid in high school. And so what I found out was, well, maybe not doing a tempo run at all the entire second semester of my senior year in high school, when I was a 3,200-meter runner, and I was not fast. I couldn't break 53, maybe 54 seconds in a 400 if you tied a cinder block around my leg and dumped me out of an airplane, right? I needed that high end aerobic stimulus, and I didn't get it, right? But I made the same mistake with this young guy, and I didn't give it enough tempo running, right? And I never
mm,
figured out why he sort of bottomed out at around 9:30 for 3,200 meters. I was 26 years old at the time. Now I look back and I think, hey, man, if I just sent him out and had to do a few more 5 milers at 5:45 pace, he would
mm,
have been he would have been way better off, right?
mm,
So you learn. It's the art of coaching. It's looking at this and kind of going, okay, they look tired. Maybe they don't need to do that workout today. Maybe go
mm,
run easy. But if you're cookbooking it, sometimes it's on paper, so we're going to go do it. And so it's the nuance. And like you said, putting somebody saying, hey, you just need to feel it. That I'm not going to over science this. I'm telling you, you need to feel this
mm,
to be able to manage the stress, to manage the urgency, to manage the psychology of race day. And we're going to go do it. We're just going to feel it, and we're not going to abandon science. But at some point, you need to realize that the neck up is really, really important and needs to be addressed sometimes as much as the neck down in
mm,
sports in general. Right?
mm.
That's the
Yeah.
way I see it.
Yeah, I recently finished up. It's a Matt Fitzgerald book.
Sure.
How bad do you want it? Where he's
Yeah.
he's basically saying like it's like it's all mental. Like it's like yes, it's the physical training you have to do it, but
Yes.
the limiting factor at the end of the day for
Mm-hmm.
cardiovascular performance is it's all up there. And if you're not putting yourself in a position where you're training that on a consistent basis, that doesn't
Yes.
mean, going hard every day, but
Mm-hmm.
like um, where you've got to be inside your head and you've got to say, yes, it hurts. This is extremely uncomfortable. I could stop right now. I could end this discomfort right now,
Right.
but I'm
And I
not going
text
to.
and I text messaged somebody yesterday, and they said, "Well, it was hard." And I said, "Well, yeah, of course it's hard
Mm,
because it's running, and if it wasn't, then we would call it bowling or darts, right? I've never met anybody
Yeah.
who went anaerobic bowling or went into lactic debt throwing darts, right? But
Mm-hmm.
here's the deal: you train restraint, you
Hmm.
train patience, you physically train the body to handle the rigors of aerobic exercise by giving them formulated workouts that increase mitochondrial density, right?
Hmm.
Distal capillarization. Those are fun
Hmm.
words, right?
Hmm.
Those are sciencey things that then put the building blocks of aerobic performance and capability into a Homo sapien, right?
Hmm.
But the training of the mind then has to come in, like you said, to then take the engine that you've built and then go out there on race day and be able to go and win the race. It's so, you can't divorce the mental from the physical. And the physical has to be there because, man, I'll tell you, we love to talk in cliche. And mind over matter is a great thing to say, and mind over matter is fun in certain coaching circles. But I'm here to tell you that when you're a mile 24 and your body's gone into full physical shutdown and you're a tough guy and you're like, I'm just going to push through it, sometimes matter wins over mind. And so you
Mm.
got to make sure that you have trained the matter, which is your body's physical ability to race. That way, when your mind actually puts the proverbial pedal down, the body can go. And so the two have to function sort of synergistically in a way that's going to work out for you on race day. And it's
Hmm.
tough business, right?
Yeah, I have no experience racing a half or a full.
Don't
Um,
do it.
I have no intention. Like 10K is as far as I want to race. Like I was a half miler in
Yeah,
high school, and then
yeah,
like I did the basically up to the steeplechase for track,
sure.
and like I hated running 8K and 10K for cross country. Like I was not interested in that at all. And so like now I'm like training for this 10K, and I'm like, man, what's with all this? Like a 10-mile long run? Like what? This is
10
garbage. This
mile
is
long
so
run.
dumb. That's
Yeah,
that's that's so awful. That's so far from me. Like
yeah, it's
so
funny.
but like I love how like from an outside perspective, like distance running is distance running. Like if you can run,
Hmm.
like I'm averaging about 40 miles a week. Like I could I can go out and run a half marathon. I could just
Sure.
I could enter a race and do that. Like some of my clients, they're like, "Oh, you did a 10-mile run," or one time I did a 12-mile run. And they're like, "Oh, go sign up for the half. Go run the half." And I'm like, "No, no, no. I'm not going to do that unless I'm racing it. Like
Yes.
I can run 13 miles, but I can't race 13 miles right now. Like there's a huge difference, and so I love learning more about the nuances of like, okay, the somebody who's training for a 5K and someone who's training for a marathon are both going to employ, like you said, some of these
Hmm.
specific zones or these specific uh, training stimuli. But like a tempo run for somebody who's racing a 5K, like that's
Hmm.
slower than their race pace. But then
Hmm.
for the marathoner or the half marathoner, now their tempo run is, could be, if they're doing the tempo based off their 5K, now it's going to be way faster than their race pace. So it's like, okay, learning about how to train somebody for a half marathon or marathon is like, I thought I understood it because I was like, oh, I know how to train for a 5K and 10K. Like, no, no, no. It's different. It's so different. And like, that's one of the things I love about endurance running is there's you can always dig deeper, you can always learn something new, and you can dig into the science, and that's great. Or you can be like Zane and Jake Robertson, and you can move to E10 Kenya and you can just learn as you go. Like
Right.
that works too. Like So it's absolutely insane.
Well, it is interesting because it raises an interesting point in that terminology doesn't always mean the same thing to everybody,
Mm,
right? When you say,
mm-hmm,
I'm going to go do an 8 mile tempo run, well, what does that mean to you?
mm-hmm,
Tempo run to some people might be marathon pace. Tempo run to some people might be 10K pace. Tempo run to some people might be the scientifically formulated uh, lactate threshold, right? Pace for
mm-hmm,
them, and
mm-hmm,
and for them, that might mean that they only run for 30 minutes, right? It's so, I'm careful not to overuse terms that can be misinterpreted, but I think for shorthand purposes, we're sort of forced to, right? I
mm-hmm,
like to
mm-hmm,
actually say, we're going to do an 8 mile run today, and you are going to run at 10 seconds a mile faster than marathon pace, right?
mm-hmm.
That way, it doesn't leave anything up to the imagination for the athlete. It's
Right.
so, when we assign these paces, we're very specific about it. If your goal race pace is 650, which is 259 marathon speed, right? A tempo run for you might be 8 miles at 640 pace, which is 10 seconds a mile faster than marathon speed. And then you might do
Mm-hmm,
some repeats down at about 620 pace on the tail end, maybe 4, 5, 6 times in 800 in 310 on a minute recovery, something like that, right?
mm-hmm,
They call that, well, that's tempo day. That's what they call it. But it's actually, there's a ton of specificity as far as exactly what it is they're doing that comprises this thing that's generically referred to as tempo day. For a 5K
mm-hmm,
runner, tempo day might be just 4 miles at a pace that is, at, gosh, 95% of max VO2 pace, and they're hanging on for dear life,
mm-hmm.
and, some people call them tempo runs, and really they're just once weekly races. That's what we did in college. We lied to
Mm-hmm.
ourselves and said they were tempo runs. They were races. Come on now,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
I set my 8 mile PR on an 8 mile tempo run in college, right? Closed in like 9:50 the last 2 miles, and we called it a tempo run. I was
It's
racing.
just
Come
tempo
on,
run.
right? Please.
Yeah, that's one of the things, like the way that I go about training now and the way that
Yeah,
I trained in college. Like part of it was, um, even though my goal was to coach, like I knew I wanted to coach while I was in college.
sure.
I wasn't paying attention to like how to coach and how to program.
Mm,
I was like, no, I'm here to run fast. I'm outsourcing all of that to my coach. It's his job to
mm,
keep track of that. And I wish I was more uh, a part of the process. Not that I would decide what I was going to do, but just more involved in saying, "Hey, coach, like, what's going on today? What's the purpose of the day? What do I need to be focused on? How do I win the day?" Right? Like, if we're making this a game, like now when I do recovery runs, I make sure that I don't let my heart rate get above about 150 beats per minute,
mm.
because that's how I ensure that I'm going to be ready for the hard
Yeah.
workout in 1 or 2 days time. When I was in college, all right, it's an easy day. All right, I'll run easy, sort of. But like maybe I was running way faster than I should have. And so it was kind of,
Hmm.
I wish I had been more like keyed in and locked into the process. And now, like, I think about every day as a game. Like, okay, what are the rules for the game today? How do I win today? So for me, it's
Yes.
heart rate 150. Keep it below that. So I start
Yes.
my watch, I switch to just the heart rate showing up on the screen, and every, 2 to 3 minutes I'm checking to make sure, oh, I go over. Okay, I'm not winning today. Which is going to mean I'm not going to win my hard workout tomorrow. So,
Yeah.
what are there things that you do either personally or that you coach your athletes, where you're making it so that they have specific things, like, this is your goal today, only focus on this, don't worry about your pace, don't worry about this, don't worry about that, like, this is all you're gonna worry about, and then tomorrow this is all you're gonna worry about, and then the next day this is all you're gonna worry about? Are you
Yes.
gamifying
It,
things?
it, yeah, and it's a good question, and it varies by the individual. I think globally speaking, I tell everybody that their job is to embrace the hard, easy dichotomy that
Mm-hmm.
is running, and do not let the training amalgamate into that sort of unrecognizable blob of semi-hard running that it
Mm-hmm.
did for me in college,
Mm-hmm.
where I would lie to myself and tell myself that running 6:30 pace on an 8 or 10 mile run the day after a hard interval day was an easy run, right? Embrace running easy as a conduit through which you are actually going to get better. And
Mm-hmm.
it's and so I really, really tell everybody that it's your job to run easy. And it seems funny because people, I think at first blush, should say, well, how hard is that? You're telling them to work hard at not working hard. Well, when you're dealing with driven people who have their experiences rooted in the US high school and collegiate systems, I've got runners who ran for Brown, University of Texas, Tulane, Johns Hopkins, High Point, and everybody has similar stories. And so embracing easy and short circuiting the wiring that we do that's quintessentially American, which is, if I study till midnight for that final, think how much more I'm going to learn if I stay up till 3 a.m., right? No pain, no gain.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Embrace the grind. When our brake pads grind, we take our car to the repair shop. We don't rejoice in slamming on the brakes harder, in speeding up, and so that we can hit the brakes at the last minute at a red light for fun because we
Mm-hmm.
love ruining the rotors on our car. We don't
Mm-hmm.
do that. We don't embrace the grind. We get rid of the grind, right?
Mm.
And so my point is we don't grind every day. So I tell everybody, your job is to embrace the short circuiting of the wiring that's gone on for you between the ages of 14 and 22 or 23 years old, if you were in school for 5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
6 if you got your COVID year, right? And so your job is to embrace running easy when I say easy. And sometimes people think I'm the old guy who stands out in the snow and howls at the moon, right? I am an advocate of heart rate in certain instances, and the biggest one and the one that's most frequent is your easy days. And I'm with you because most of the people I coach are about your age, right? And I tell them, look, 135 to 150, let's get in that range on your heart rate, right? And I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
see easy runs at 167 because that
Mm-hmm.
means you're doing something that's harder than easy, but not training in an actual zone or training a system that's specific enough to really do anything for you. And because you're still trying to recover from the hammer festival that was yesterday's workout, you're really actually doing more damage than harm, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we
Mm-hmm.
love to embrace the get 1% better every day thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, listen, I'm from Tyler, Texas, not great at math. Listen, I've been getting by on my good looks and my scintillating wit my whole life. But I'm here to tell you that in 100 days, if you get 1% better, that means you're going to be 100% better, right?
Mm-hmm.
Than you were 3 months and 10 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen that happen? You ever
It's
seen somebody get
impossible.
100%? Well, what was 100% of your 800 time? I mean, you were going to get one, so you're going to run a zero. That's your goal. In 100 days, you're going to run a zero in that race, right? So let's just be careful about the silly stuff we say, right?
Yeah.
And then don't try to do things, which inevitably means that we are going to be running hard on our easy days because our progress is not like that.
Mm-hmm.
Distance running progress is more like that, little uptick. It's like that, little uptick, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing I tell people that their job is to be consistently good, right? Everybody knew the guy who was occasionally great, right? Bust a
Mhm.
workout, but then would go 3 weeks and would drop out of workouts or be in dead last.
Mhm.
Let's just be the guy who's just consistently good. So be consistent. It's your job to embrace consistency, meaning let's create reproducibility in our effort by meeting the demands of the day. It's your job to study the workout because they're sent to everybody 14 days in advance.
Mhm.
Understand the parameters of the work, right? And embrace simply meeting the demands of the workout. It's not your job to beat the workout.
Mhm.
The paces are set for a reason to
Mhm.
get the physiologic result, which is the goal that you have set 4 months from now. You don't need to beat the a workout. It's my job to think. It's your job to simply just understand it and meet the demands. So be consistently good and embrace recovery and embrace easy days. And those are two things we didn't do in college. We ran hard on easy days, and then we would try to beat the workout, right?
Mhm.
And everybody loves that coach that would hike his football coaching shorts up, over his belly button, and would love watching guys vomit and all that deal on spring break in high school, because they were the
Mhm.
brave ones that didn't go on a family ski trip, right? Well,
Mhm.
we're done with that, man. We know how to get better without having blood squirting out the corners of your eyes every day at practice. We know that,
Mhm.
right? Yeah.
Yes. We
Um,
should anyway.
but we tend to relapse. I mean, running really, really hard, going into quote the pain cave, right, is necessary at
Mhm.
times, but going into it all the time, right,
Mhm.
can lead to injury and blindness and early death of your career, right? And
The new saying is dipping into the well.
yeah, dipping into the well, right? Well, you go into the well too much, that well's going to run dry,
Mhm.
and but it's a sexy beast. It's intoxicating.
Mhm.
It's incredibly um, uh, 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 attractive to people who are already driven,
Mhm.
who embrace the need to work hard to do hard things. And so it's a sexy beast that people tend to relapse into, which is running too hard at times when they're not supposed to, right?
Mhm.
But then having this massive workout that's set up for it to be hard and then showing up maybe coming up a bit short. So, it's about balance, right? But I'm a believer in the big workout. We do big
Mhm.
workouts, and then we recover hard. That's the key. Yeah.
Do you have like a 60-40 sort of balance through the week where like 60% of your running days are easy focused, 40%
hmm
are hard focused, or how does that on average play out?
The funny thing is, I haven't run percentages on it. I look at the runner's goals, I look at their current fitness, and I assign the work in volumes that's appropriate for them to get where they want to get, right? We do big workout typically midweek. Today, for some people, it was 15 miles of total running when you do the warm ups and the cool downs, right?
Mhm.
And then they'll have another, 18 to 20 mile run this Saturday because some of them have a big workout on Saturday, right? And then it's just filling it in. Some people are at 65 to miles a week. Some people are at 80 miles a week. And so I don't look at percentages as much as I look at what is this workout designed to accomplish, right? If you're
Mhm.
training for a marathon, doing 4 miles of lactate threshold work on a Wednesday is not adequate. And I had some people come to me and say, "Well, this is what I was doing," and I tell them, "Well, no wonder you were dying at mile 18 of your marathon. You were training, doing as much lactate threshold work as uh, some of my high school girls, would
Mhm.
do when they
Mhm.
were seniors in high school to run the 3200, right?"
Mhm.
And so it's important to meet the needs of the event that they're trying to run. And so I prescribe work that's commensurate with that goal to meet the demands of that. Typically on marathon builds with an experienced runner, Lactate threshold sessions total 10 miles of work, up to 12 miles of work, sometimes more, but 10 to 12 miles of work is pretty typical. The critical velocity sessions, 8 to 12,000 meters of work, depending on the individual. And, I do all that on 1 minute of recovery per 1,000 meters run, right? So it might be, 4 sets of 2K, 1K, 2K with 2 minutes recovery, 1K with 1 minute recovery. You might come in and out of that, or, might run 1,500, 3 times a 1,200, 3 times 1,000, 6 times an 800, all on 1 minute of recovery per, repeat run. So those are the kinds of volume that I give on a big workout midweek, right? And then they may do some speed development stuff, right, on a Friday. So throw in, 2 20 or 30-second strides per mile in the middle 5 miles of a 7-mile run, the day before a 17, 18, 19-mile run, right? Because you still got to spin the wheels a little bit. So do a little bit of neuromuscular stimulus stuff, but a little bit. Running an event that, is about 1% and anaerobic in its composition, right? Marathon, half marathon. Don't need to do a lot of anaerobic stuff, but you've got to spin the wheels, right? So I have people spin down and they may run, 12 to 14 times 20-second fast strides in the middle of a 7, 8, 9-mile run on a Friday afternoon, on the trail around the lake, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Regardless of the distance, at the very end, you're probably going to have to try to outkick somebody. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And, and just from a neuromuscular standpoint, if you can just push that red line out, because if you think about it, and everything from the 800 to the marathon, what are we actually spending our time doing? I'm trying to change where the red line is, right? Right?
Yeah.
So you're a guy that sits around on the couch. You haven't run a day in your life. Your red line is probably 10-minute pace for 150 meters, right?
Yeah.
For, Kira D'Amato, her red line apparently, right, is 5:20 pace for 26 miles. That's her red line. But so how do you push the red line out? That's the point. How do you increase running economy? How do you increase running efficiency? How do you build this? Now, you build it aerobically, but it's also neurologic. And you're a scientist. I'm preaching to the choir here, right? And so when I say neuromuscular stimulus, it's building the neurologic pathways by which when your brain says go, the legs know what go means, right? And so, I'm talking to one young lady right now, and the goal is to qualify for the U.S. Olympic trials in the marathon, right? The red line right now for the marathon is 6:15 pace. How do we get that to 5:59 pace? Why 5:59? Well, because that's like 2:36.50, right? And that'll get you under the line, right? And you'll get into the trials. So how do we make running 6-minute pace just feel easy? Push the red line out. So today it was, 3 miles in 16:49, 2 times a mile in 5:27, and then a couple of 800s down around 2:37, 2:38. Yeah, we're pushing the red line. We're trying to make running 6-minute pace easier, right? Short term, the goal's a 10K. Long term, jump back in a marathon in the fall. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that reminds me of something I was just reading about Frank Shorter. In the middle of, his highest volume weeks prepping for a marathon, he was still doing 200s in 26 to 28, because he was like, if I can run those that fast, marathon pace is a breeze. It's gonna feel easy.
Right. Yeah. It's so you've got to make sure that you don't completely neglect those systems, but you also have to really, really be careful that you're not training them in volumes that are inappropriate, right? So 5% of your volume is anaerobic per week, and you're training for the marathon, I would argue that that's about 4.5% too much. Right?
Yeah.
Because it is what it is, man. You can run 150 meter sprints until the cows come home. The question is, can you run for the men? 5:15 pace for 26 straight miles,
Mm.
right? That
Mhm.
is a high anaerobic endeavor that has very, very little anaerobic component to it as far
Mhm.
as the system that you're training and the physical demands in a highly trained runner.
Yeah, that's yeah, that the context of knowing that, like, yeah, it's like 99% aerobic. Like, why spend time doing something that's not going to improve that 99%? Like, you're missing the forest for the trees there.
I
So,
agree. I agree. And keep in mind, I'm a JD, a doctor of jurisprudence, not an MD, right? And I'm not a PhD, and I'm not as smart as you. And so, what did I have to do? People reached out to me and said, I need help. And one thing that we learned in law school is that we don't know the answer, but we're really, really good at looking things up,
mm,
right?
mhm,
And so, you go and learn what you need to know to be able to meet your client's needs, right? And so if you're trying to start a trash company, then you need to make sure that you know how to pick up people's trash and understand how to scale your business, right?
mhm,
If you don't know, go look it up or ask for help. And so what did I do? I'm not scared to pick up the phone and call, right? And
mhm.
so, I have had the benefit of coaching high schoolers who went on and ran collegiately, right? So what better resource than um, the top collegiate coaches, right? And
Mhm.
so I'm unashamed to say that I've, you know, I've, I've called Steve Gully, be like, Coach, what do you think about this, right?
Mhm.
Or if I have to, and um, I, I've, I'll, I'll call Heather Burrows, right? I'll be
Mhm.
like, Coach Burrows, what do you think about this? I mean, I don't know. I mean, you figure Coach Wetmore and Coach Burrows have coached one or two decent runners in their time, right? Might know a
Yeah.
little something, might be able to help a little something.
Uh-huh.
John Hayes, right? Was it Texas? Now is it Wake Forest? I don't know. I mean, was Lino Manzano okay? I mean, I guess he was pretty. Was Lopez Lamong a decent runner? Oh, gee, I don't know. So and Pat Tyson, right? He's at Gonzaga, right? I mean,
Mhm.
he spent part of his time living on the side of a hill with Pre back in his young formative years. I mean, so you
Mhm.
consult these people, right? And then, of
Mhm.
course, here in Texas, Rick Miller at Grapevine High School, Chris Schrader, the famous Chris Schrader. He was my coach when I was in elementary, when I was in junior high, when I was in eighth grade, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Coached what, 60, 70 state champions?
Wow.
I mean,
Mhm.
use people who are your resources and don't try to reinvent the wheel because, Dr. V Hill, right? And folks like that, they've got the answers. So let's not try to reinvent the wheel. That wheel has been built, but let's tweak it for our own needs and recognize, hey, maybe I'm not in Boulder where there's low humidity and you can run outside at noon year round, right? We're in
Mhm.
Texas, right? Uh,
Mhm.
Maybe I'm not at 6,500 feet in Colorado Springs. So maybe we can train at marathon pace without overloading our runners, but at the same time, we got to be cognizant of the reality that it's 85% humidity and 80 degrees. So you got to
Mhm.
tweak it. You got to know how to do that, but still consult experts and make sure that you know where you're going. And so I did a lot of that early in my career. I did a ton of that. That's
Mhm.
okay, right? They're all, we're a pretty sharing bunch as coaches. When
Mhm.
people ask you, like, hey, but I'll tell an athlete this: if your coach can't tell you why you're doing something every day, probably need to rethink your relationship with that coach. Because if that coach doesn't
Mhm.
know the why, right, then
Mhm.
I've got a concern about that. So I always tell my
Mhm.
athletes, listen, man, this is a benevolent dictatorship. You're allowed to ask why. Oops, I'm sorry about that. One time I was talking to Pat Tyson, and I said, what about frog jumps and box jumps and hurdle drills and all this? And he sat there for, 30, 40, 50 seconds. I rattled all this stuff off. He goes, Jeff. I said, yeah, coach, what? He goes, hey, man, how old's this kid? I'm like, well, he's a senior in high school. He's 17. He'll be 18. He goes, just make it about the running. And I'm like, oh, okay. All right. And then the guy ended up going to run 4:11 and 9:02 that spring.
Wow.
I was trying to
Mhm.
guss it up so much. I was trying to be perfect. right?
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. Now, I hesitate to tell people just make it about to running, but sometimes they worry so much about, exactly how many beers they're allowed to have and how much fat they're allowed to have and have they gotten their
Mm-hmm.
micros and all this other stuff. And I'm like, well, I know, but you only ran 31 miles last week and you're training for a marathon. Like, why don't you just worry about the running? Because the rest of that stuff's not going to help you. All right. So I think the fasting seems done. So
That's too funny. But yeah,
yeah.
that's so true. Like you can easily get caught up in the little things and forget like, oh yeah, I have to run that far. I should probably be running pretty far for the week.
Yeah, like I always say, I'm reluctant to just say make it about the running. But somebody the other day said, "Man, that was a really long workout," and she's training for a half marathon. I said, "Yeah, it's because you run really long races."
That's got to be a light bulb moment for her. Like, oh
Oh,
yeah,
I don't
that
know if it
makes
was a light bulb moment, but it was a fun zinger to fire off. That's for sure, right? You know?
for sure. That's too funny. So, were there any specific aha moments, either early
Mm.
on in the coaching career or like even now? Like it sounds like you're not content knowing what you know now. Like you're still trying to push the envelope, get better at coaching.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
what any aha moments that you can share?
Yeah, in the aha moments, I think at this point for the listeners slash viewers may not be particularly earth shattering, which was um, you can run easier more often and still get better.
Mm,
Learning that the human body breaks when it's under too much stress. And if it doesn't break, you run races that look like you're broken in spirit,
mm,
right?
mm-hmm,
It's obvious. You could see it sometimes. It means like, oof, that's not good, right?
mm-hmm,
And so the aha moment for me was that you could reduce your training density and you could be super, super moderate paces, and that tough runners are going to race fast.
mm-hmm,
Um, the realization that I came to probably in 2008 that you couldn't give a runner a hard workout to build a set of guts in them that they don't already have.
mm-hmm,
Tough guys and tough gals are tough guys and tough gals,
mm-hmm,
right? They can get toughness through increased confidence, through increased fitness that then allows them to run with confidence and then run fast races, which then can begat toughness because it's worth it to run hard if the result is going to be that, and they can point at it, right?
mm-hmm,
But inherently, guts and toughness are an intrinsic thing. And so the aha moment I had was sort of an aha season where I said, we're going to run at paces that make sense rather than running races in practice to try to like build toughness so they'll be ready to do it race day. And then suddenly what happened was I noticed physically the physical capacity just blossomed because there wasn't just constant, just sort of just lump of cortisol just sitting in their gut all day, every day. And
mm-hmm,
suddenly the races became phenomenally good,
mm,
right? Um, the other sort of aha moment I've had is that we as a society tend to confuse pessimism for realism,
mm,
right? And so what I tell people is within reason. I mean, you can't tell somebody, who can't get more than 1 inch off the floor and they're 5'6" that they're going to dunk a basketball. I mean, that might not be realistic, but within the
mm-hmm,
realm of reason, I tell people dream big. Now let's just get the blueprint together, understand this is a patience game, and then let's go to work and let's dare to dream. Because at the end of the day, what is life without dreams? What is life without hope? What is life without the things that make it spicy rather than mundane? So
mm-hmm,
dream big, and we tend to go to the can't before the can sometimes. And I had to admit that sometimes early in my career, it's like, well, like I told somebody the other day, and that scene in Rudy, where they said, Notre Dame's not for everybody, but don't confuse
mm,
pessimism for realism. Instead of shutting it down, go, hey, yeah, listen, maybe qualify for the Olympic trials isn't the cards for you. We've got 700, 650 days, right? So let's use the next 650 days judiciously and let's see where we end up,
Hmm.
right? So the aha moment for me was when somebody did something I told them they couldn't do. Physically, I asked them, listen, I don't know if that's possible. They went and did it, and they kind of, it was the greatest I told you so moment of all time. And I said, hey, that's really, really good. So don't give up on our dreams. Dare to dream big, even if it's on the fringes of realistic. And then let's just
Hmm.
go work. Because listen, there's nobility and there's utility in the process of working, right?
Hmm.
Builds character. It builds a huge sense of satisfaction. And along the way, even if you don't hit the mark, you're still going to do something pretty phenomenally good. You're going to
Yeah.
be infinitely proud of. That's the way I see it.
You just said it in a way that is way better than I've been able to say something like that to my high school kids. But the thing that I try to get across to them is like shoot for excellence, and the person that you will become along the way is like a really good teammate and a really good friend and someone that people can depend on and somebody who's like brave and courageous and willing to do very difficult things. And even if you don't reach that goal, you're going to be like a way better person. And it's worth it. It's worth putting in all that time and effort and pain. You
I
got to deal
agree.
with some pain. Like it's worth it. So
I agree.
so for anybody watching and listening, how can they follow the club? And if they have questions, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah. On Instagram, we're at Bat City Track Club. And then my actual personal Instagram is at JD Cunningham 97. Um, and then as far as, Bat City Track Club, we're basically regionally elite. I always joke with people. I say, look, we're highly competitively recreational, right?
Mm,
The men's PRs on the team range from the marathon 219 up into the 240s, right?
mm,
And then uh, and the women are in the 240s up into the up into the high 250s is sort of where we are.
mm.
I think we have one woman on the team who's over 3 hours, I think. But yeah, that's coming down fast, right? Have the
Hmm.
potential as a woman, to break 3 hours, be in the zone, and be sort of in that sort of training phase and period in your life where it's like, hey, if I put this together, I'm going to be able to break three. That's kind of what I look at, for the ladies. And for the men, basically it's, can you run 240 down into the two teens in the marathon? That's kind of what we're looking at, right?
Yeah, that's
We
fast.
have a couple of remote people, so it's not completely limited to Austin, right?
Hmm.
We have one elite lady up in Dallas who runs for the club. And,
Hmm.
so we're not completely opposed to that, but for the most part, it's regional and Austin based because I like to be able to see people in their workouts. So,
That's so awesome. Do y'all meet every day?
no, we don't meet every day because I'm trying to practice law
Busy.
here. So we meet on Wednesdays for big workouts. So today was big tempo workout day. Last Wednesday was a big critical velocity session on the track, right? This Saturday, because we have the Woodlands Marathon coming up, and then
Hmm.
we have the Eugene Marathon coming up on May 1st for a ton of people.
Hmm.
We have a big marathon workout Saturday morning, so I'll see everybody again early on Saturday morning, and they'll hit those workouts however they've been prescribed. So,
Awesome. That's so
yep.
awesome. Well, Coach Cunningham, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This has been a really fun conversation, and I've learned a lot. And yeah, I can't wait to have you back on again in the future to discuss some more stuff.
I would love it anytime. Like I always like to say, I've never met a sentence I didn't like to say.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Coach.
All
All right,
right, have a
y'all.
good one. Good night.
Likewise. All right, y'all. Thanks for watching and listening, and stay tuned for next week's episode. Adios.